When the nation's top law enforcement official starts dodging simple questions, that's not just politics, it's panic. Viewers across the country are asking the same thing tonight. What is Attorney General Pam Bondi hiding, and how deep does this really go? Because this wasn't just another Senate hearing. What unfolded on that floor exposed something far darker than anyone expected. An attorney general fighting harder to protect her image than to protect the truth. Epstein files left untouched, bribe allegations buried, and career prosecutors dismissed for asking questions. The chaos you're about to hear wasn't a movie scene. It was real, and it happened in the United States Senate. From the moment the first question hit, the tension was electric. A simple query about a dismissed lawsuit turned into a verbal explosion.
By Congress for lying with your
we can stipulate to, you can stipulate to all your personal attacks on the Democratic members of the committee.
Personal attacks? You've been attacking my FBI director. You've been attacking my office. You've been attacking.
But what we're interested in,
borders are.
What we're interested in is the answer to these oversight questions.
You want your,
so
no,
you were
oversight.
you were asked by my colleague. You were asked by my colleague.
Attacking good people.
Regular order, Madam Chair, so I can ask a question. You were asked by my colleague from Vermont whether you will support providing a video or audio tape, if it exists, of Mr. Holman taking $50,000 in bribe money from the FBI. Will you support a request by this committee to provide that tape or tapes to the committee? Yes or no?
Senator Schiff, you can talk to Director Patel about that.
Well, I'm talking to you about it. You're the Attorney General. This will be your decision. Will you support?
You don't have to tell me what is my decision and what is not my decision. I said you can talk to Director Patel.
You don't have to try to.
You think you've got a gotcha with Tom Homan, our borders czar, who's been out there fighting for our country since Donald Trump took office.
I'm trying to ask a question. Regular order, please.
Treasury compiles suspicious activity reports, referred to often as SARs, that DOJ receives automatically. Hundreds related to accounts of Jeffrey Epstein. How many of those Treasury SARs did you or Director Patel investigate?
Senator, I'm not sure if you're concerned because you took money, I believe, did you, from Reid Hoffman, one of Epstein's closest confidants, not only once but twice in 2018 and 2024, if that's correct. But, Senator, did you ask Merrick Garland any of this over the last 4 years when he sat before you? This investigation has been going on. This investigation was closed. Did you ask Alex Acosta that?
And Patel came to office, you said you would look into this. There were hundreds of suspicious activity reports. Some people would deduce from the fact that they are called suspicious activity reports that there might be suspicious activity. And yet you seem to have looked at 0 of those suspicious activity reports involving Jeffrey Epstein accounts. Let me ask you something else. There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump left and right, when you're the one who was taking money from one of Epstein's closest confidants, I believe, I could be wrong, correct me, Reid Hoffman, who was with Jeffrey Epstein on multiple occasions. And the senator sitting right next to you tried to block the flight logs from being released. Yet you're grilling me on President Trump and some photograph with Epstein? Come on.
The question is, did the FBI find those photographs that have been discussed publicly by a witness who claimed Jeffrey Epstein showed them to him? You don't know anything about that. Okay.
You voted to shut down the government, and you're sitting here, our law enforcement officers aren't being paid. They're out there working to protect you. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will.
been on this committee for more than 20 years. That's the kind of testimony you expect from this administration. A simple question as to whether or not they had a legal rationale for deploying National Guard troops becomes grounds for a personal attack. I think it's a legitimate question. It's my responsibility. She refuses to answer as to whether she had any conversation with the White House about deploying national troops to my state.
We should reform the grand jury process to ensure that the government is not abusing its power and authority, and it will require transparency and accountability reforms at DOJ so that you will and other attorneys general be held accountable for these kinds of decisions. Will you join me in supporting that kind of reform?
Senator Blumenthal, I find it so interesting that you didn't bring any of this up during President Biden's administration when he was doing everything to protect Hunter Biden, his son. And I think you just saw what Director Radcliffe just released.
You know, this is an effort to be positive.
If I can finish answering the question, I'm not going to yell over you. I'm not going to get in the gutter with you. But information that the Biden administration told them not to investigate Hunter Biden's involvement with Ukraine. I'm not going to be lectured to you about integrity
another topic,
by
and I'm hoping
someone
that you will review the
When Senator Blumenthal asked Bondi about her former firm and its connection to powerful lobbyist Brian Ballard, her tone snapped. Instead of answering, she lashed out, accusing the senator of lying about his military record. It wasn't just defensive, it was calculated chaos, the kind of tactic used when someone knows the truth could burn more than just a reputation. And yet, despite the theatrics, the bigger mystery stayed hanging in the air: what conversations really happened behind closed doors between Bondi and the people lobbying to protect the powerful. For those who followed Bondi's rise, this moment didn't come out of nowhere. She built her career as a prosecutor known for being tough and loyal, but loyalty can cut both ways, and that loyalty to whom is what this hearing was really about. Because when she became Attorney General, the public expected accountability. What they got instead was a wall of silence, layered with denial, redirection, and just enough outrage to muddy every real question. The senators tried again. This time the topic shifted to money, a $50,000 bribe that allegedly found its way to a senior official. The evidence: a televised interview where the accused refused to answer whether he'd taken it. Straightforward enough, right? Except Bondi didn't seem to think so. She claimed she wasn't in office at the time. She pushed responsibility to someone else. And when pressed again by Senator Schiff, did he take the money, yes or no, she deflected, repeating the same line: "That happened before my confirmation." The room fell silent. Viewers watching could feel it, the kind of silence that screams louder than words, because that's what evasion sounds like when the truth is closing in. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. The deeper you looked, the clearer the pattern became. Questions about missing Treasury reports, those suspicious activity records tied to Jeffrey Epstein's accounts, were brushed aside as if they didn't exist. Hundreds of flagged transactions, never reviewed. When asked how many she'd personally examined, Bondi didn't give a number. Instead, she turned on the senators themselves, accusing them of hypocrisy, of taking donations from people linked to Epstein. She flipped the narrative completely, weaponizing outrage to drown out accountability. Classic deflection, and for a moment, it almost worked. What most viewers didn't realize is that these reports aren't rumors, they're official government filings designed to track potential criminal or financial misconduct. Ignoring them isn't just negligence, it's a choice. And when the Attorney General admits that none were reviewed under her watch, the question shifts from incompetence to intent. What was she trying to protect? Or more importantly, who? As the hearing went on, it started feeling less like oversight and more like theater. Senators were trying to extract facts while Bondi was performing damage control. Each time a question came close to revealing something substantial, she threw another verbal grenade. You voted to shut down the government. You lied about your service. You hate the president. The attacks weren't answers, they were distractions. And every second she bought with those deflections kept the public one step further from the truth. But one exchange in particular revealed just how much she was willing to risk to avoid transparency. Senator Whitehouse brought up one of the most controversial points of all: allegations that Epstein had shown people photos of powerful men with underage women. He asked Bondi directly, did the FBI find those photos, had she seen them? Her response wasn't an answer, it was rage. She accused the senator of slandering people, turned the question back on his campaign donors, and once again shifted blame. It was a masterclass in evasion, but hidden inside that outrage was something else: fear. Because if even one of those claims proved true, it wouldn't just be a scandal, it would be a seismic event inside the Justice Department. That moment cracked something open. For years, whispers about the Epstein files have lingered, files said to contain names, transactions, even communications implicating influential figures across politics and business. Bondi once bragged in an interview that the list was sitting on her desk, yet in this hearing, she quietly admitted she hadn't reviewed it fully. She claimed selective searches were run, focusing on specific names. That might sound procedural, but it's actually alarming. Because when law enforcement starts choosing who gets investigated and who gets ignored, justice isn't blind anymore, it's bought. And then came the firings. Behind the polished speeches and legal jargon, several career prosecutors inside the DOJ had already been dismissed or reassigned. Their mistake? Raising questions about cases tied to politically sensitive figures. Internal sources described it as a purge, a message to anyone who tried to pursue investigations that hit too close to home. Bondi's defense was predictable. She called it routine restructuring. But there's nothing routine about removing veteran prosecutors in the middle of ongoing corruption cases. It sends one message loud and clear: loyalty over law. Inside the hearing room you could see the frustration building. Senators who'd been patient at first were now pushing harder, voices raised, tone sharpened. They demanded the release of files, tapes, internal memos. Bondi's answers got shorter, her posture tightened. The air grew thick with tension, and just when it seemed she might finally give a real response, she pivoted to an entirely different topic, accusing the prior administration of covering for someone else. It was whiplash politics, designed to confuse and exhaust. But to the millions watching, it was obvious she wasn't defending the DOJ, she was defending herself. And here's where things take a darker turn. Beyond the walls of that chamber, there's growing concern that the Justice Department is no longer operating independently. Multiple insiders have hinted that key investigations are being quietly stalled or rerouted. Financial records vanish into redacted folders. Internal memos never make it to public record. It's not just bureaucratic delay, it's strategic silence. And the longer that silence lasts, the more power shifts away from accountability and into secrecy. Think about what that means. If the country's top law enforcement agency is selectively deciding which crimes deserve attention, then justice itself becomes conditional. It stops being about truth and starts being about influence. That's not democracy, that's control. And what played out in that Senate hearing was the most public display yet of that control slipping into full view. Viewers who tuned in for routine oversight instead got a front-row seat to the unraveling of credibility. Every unanswered question, every personal insult, every redirection, it all painted a picture of an attorney general who's lost sight of the very oath she took. When Senator Blumenthal asked whether she'd support reforms to prevent future abuse of power, Bondi deflected again, attacking unrelated investigations from previous years. The irony was staggering. The conversation wasn't about partisanship, it was about transparency. And she couldn't even say yes to that. So where does that leave us? With an administration that promised integrity but delivered opacity, with files that remain sealed, reports that remain unread, and officials who remain unaccountable. For the average American, this isn't some distant political drama, it's a test of whether the law still means the same thing for everyone. Because if those in power can hide behind titles, excuses, and endless hearings, then justice isn't justice, it's theater. There's something haunting about the way these hearings end, not with resolution, but with exhaustion. The senators packed up their notes, the headlines flashed across screens for a few hours, and then the noise faded, just as it always does. But what didn't fade was the unease, the sense that something crucial is being withheld, something the public has every right to see. Those Epstein files, those suspicious reports, those internal memos, they're not just evidence, they're history. And the longer they stay buried, the more we all lose faith in the idea that truth can ever surface. It's easy to tune out, to scroll past another political scandal and think it's just business as usual, but this time it's different. Because what happened here doesn't just expose one official's evasions, it exposes a pattern that stretches across administrations and parties. It's the playbook of power: deny, deflect, and distract, until the truth dies of exhaustion. And every time it works, we get further from the accountability that democracy depends on. If you strip away the headlines and the noise, the real story is brutally simple: a Justice Department that won't answer questions about Epstein, a top official sidestepping bribery claims, and a pattern of silence where transparency should be. The consequences aren't just political, they're moral. Because once the public stops believing that truth matters, corruption wins without ever needing to hide. There's still one thing Bondi said during that hearing that stands out. In her closing remarks, she insisted she'd abided by every ethics standard. On paper, that sounds reassuring. But in context it felt hollow, a promise made to a public that's already seen too much. Because ethics aren't proven by statements, they're proven by actions, and so far, the actions tell a very different story. For those of us watching from the outside, the responsibility now falls on awareness, paying attention, asking the questions that officials avoid. The truth doesn't disappear, it's buried under noise, and it takes persistence to dig it out. That's the part the powerful count on us forgetting, but not this time. Because this isn't about one politician, one hearing, or one department. It's about the principle that no one, not even an attorney general, should be above scrutiny. The justice system only works when it's transparent, when every citizen can see that accountability applies equally to all. And when that transparency is replaced with excuses and anger, it's a warning sign we can't afford to ignore. The hearing may be over, but the story isn't. Somewhere in those sealed files and silent hallways, the truth is waiting. It always is. The only question is whether we'll keep demanding it loudly enough for them to finally open the door, because silence protects power, but pressure breaks it. If you've watched this far, you already know what's at stake. Don't let the noise fade. Stay informed, share this story, hold every official to the same standard, and if you believe that justice should serve the people, not the powerful, make sure your voice counts. Subscribe, like this video, and help us keep the spotlight where it belongs on the truth they don't want you to see.